Wow, there we go. All right. Hi, everybody. So this is version 2 of my interviews with Gemma and Dominic, because we didn't go live last Wednesday because I had technical difficulties. So they have graciously said to do it again. So we're actually here. It's Friday night, and Dom's got a new haircut since the last I saw him.
Yeah.
It looks very nice.
Had to clean it up a little.
Yeah, to clean it up a little. And Gemma's got a whole new style going on. All right. So for those who might not know you as well, I want you guys to introduce yourself, like what brands you work for and what your role is. So Gemma, you go first. So who do you work for?
I am National Brand Ambassador with Aberlour Single Malt Scotch, which is right here, if you're not familiar with it.
There you go. A little brand plug. Very pretty. I don't think I've ever had it. Looks lovely. And what is your role for that? You're the National Brand Ambassador. So, and you're, well, then I'll go to Dominic and then we'll come back. So Dominic, what's your role?
So I work for Pernod Ricard.
Yes.
I work for Pernod Ricard as their one of their whiskey specialists, one of 5 whiskey specialists that we have here in North America, working on brands like Glenlivet, Chivas, Redbreast, Green Spot, Jefferson's, Rabbit Hole. It goes on and on.
Wow, fantastic. Now, when we spoke on Wednesday, this is great that we get to do this again, so I can ask you more specific questions. So Gemma, your role is a little bit different. So you've gone from, you used to work with trade, but now your role, you're working with, you said off-premise, and that doesn't just mean liquor stores, that actually means consumers, correct?
Yeah, so I would say 90% of my focus at the minute is direct to consumer. I literally just got off a tasting right before I spoke to you with, I think it was like 25 people that are consumers. They're regular people. So we've shifted from, I shouldn't really say shifted, because Aberlour has always been a big brand in off-premise. We're still doing a lot of work in the off-premise, but obviously with the way bars are at the moment, we can't physically spend a lot of time in the bars, so we figured out ways to still connect with consumers virtually, which is what everybody's saying.
It is true, but like which is amazing. I think it's such a great thing. So you're kind of building brand awareness rather than just kind of building brand awareness, and through that, hopefully they'll go out and purchase the product. But before that, you were traveling a lot as a national brand ambassador. You were going into markets. You were working with distributor. So when you worked with the distributor, were you going into accounts then, or was it still working with consumers?
Yeah, so how I scheduled it was Monday to Friday. So I never did, well, not usually, I didn't do like a day here and a day there, you know, like 1 minute you're at one part of the country and the next you're somewhere else. We did it as weeks. So we took a week at a time. We'll do Florida, then we'll do Texas, then we'll do somewhere else. And it was scheduled, the whole calendar was scheduled out ahead of time so that we knew exactly.
How long ahead of time? Yes, because that's a big thing. Like that one of the things I hate about being a brand ambassador was always that, you know, my schedule wasn't my own. Like I would get last minute requests, and I try to always be like, I need at least 2 weeks notice, but no, they'd be like, well, so you were able to actually, your boss and you came up with this plan.
Yeah, so it needs to be as far ahead as possible. And the local markets were kind of told in advance, you know, this is the plan, this is how it's going to be executed, these are all the things that we're going to cover. In order for us to cover all of these things effectively, we need as much advance notice. So you can't be chopping and changing things at the last minute. You can't be throwing in an event at the last minute because there's nowhere to put it. So I would send the schedule out the week before I would travel, and it would be packed, completely packed. So they would know, like, there literally is no leeway anywhere. There's nowhere that you can fit anything else in on a good week. But most of the times it was filled like that because we had so much advance notice. So I would be planning out months ahead of time with.
So they were planning work with, like, so the distributor sales rep would actually get a notice and be like, okay, so Gemma's coming into market. If you want her to work, you have to book out, like, okay, you're going to do work with on this day. Like they would have to actually plan your time, or you could plan. Okay. And then they would send it to you.
Both. So they would do what they're capable of doing, being like putting me in touch with the local accounts or setting up staff trainings, you know, things like that I couldn't physically do because I don't know the context. Right. But equally, we would be doing back end stuff. We would be booking like consumer events, we would book PR events, we would be filling in the slots around everything else. So there literally was never, there was no open time.
That's such a smart way of doing things because, you know, as I'm sure, and Dominic, and I'm sure you've experienced with other brands, you would show up in a marketplace, you know, and they would kind of have a schedule, but sometimes you were just thrown to the distributor, be like, "Are you going to do work with?" And there was no schedule, and then suddenly
they would cancel. They would be like,
and sometimes they're working on other brands that instead of what you're responsible for.
No, I think that it is really, really smart. And also, so you can plan your own life, right? So you know exactly where you're going to be like weeks in advance, which is a big thing because you have a life. So you need to be able to plan things around it. Like, I need to go to the doctors, or I need to have a vacation, or whatever it is. I already know.
And I noticed that with other national ambassadors that that to and fro and being pulled in every direction for a day and a day here and 2 days there, it's they get burned out so fast. Mm-hmm. They don't know where they are half the time. They're not able to do it as well, because when at least in my experience, when I would go in, I would know I am in Texas for 5 whole days, and I was working with that local team constantly for those 5 days, as opposed to just on and off and then, you know, pulled back and forward. It was much more in control, which was great.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And the fact that it came from your brand team, they arranged it for you. Because they're not going to listen to you if you call up and say, "Hey, I need this to be happening," but they'll listen to the brand, right? Because the brand's giving them money, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Maybe if you're a smaller brand, they might not pay them. But being part of Pernod definitely probably helps, gives them a little priority. But no, I think that's fantastic, because you do get burnt out. I used to not know what state I was in half the time, and I'd be constantly jumping. And then sometimes you get there and you're like, I just traveled 12 hours across the country and there's nothing.
And you've canceled?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like really disheartening. It's like, oh God. So, and so Dominic, so your role is more, before COVID, and also even now, like you're mostly on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I would say, well, my market is California. So California being so big, I was all over the place. I was mostly in Southern California, so I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, visits over to Sacramento, San Jose. I mean, you know, when I left San Francisco back in 2011, it was more about Los Angeles and San Francisco, and you still had some great bars in San Jose and Sacramento, but now it's just every market is so just full of great bars and restaurants that it had me busy. Now my focus is kind of what GEMMA does. I do a lot of virtual trainings as well, and then to the accounts that I can go to in Oakland and San Francisco, I do want to get to Sacramento and occasionally get to San Jose, but it's up to our discretion. The company really is like, if you feel safe, if you want to do it. And most of the time, you know, a lot of the accounts haven't really opened yet. Not until the last month, I would say, that we started doing more indoor and outdoor.
Right. I think they just got shut down again.
Yeah, actually Monday is shut down again.
Oh,
so virtual will be 100%.
Virtual is 100%. So for you, do you have like KPIs? Like, you know, do you have to do sales cases? Do you have to do like a certain amount of menu placements?
I don't have KPIs like that, but that's like, you know, that makes sense to like a lot about 10 years ago with your KPIs, getting your placements. Now it's just getting, we have KPIs on trainings, KPIs on working with other companies to work with them to do some trainings and to get their employees involved. So like doing something with Facebook or Google, which we do a lot of trainings with. And then KPI on working with some of our local reps that we have working with Pernod Ricard. So in San Francisco. And then I still do a lot of work with my LA team too, but I do a lot of virtual work with them.
Right. Okay. How do you do virtual work with your
you know what? It's all brand new. So I was telling a class yesterday, I was like, well, I've done everything from, I had an LA rep saying, hey, could you do this virtual? It's going to be for about 15 buyers and they're going to be in my backyard for a barbecue. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Yeah. All right, sure. So virtually they had me on a big screen TV and
that's amazing.
They had 20 buyers all like separated in different tables and they had a chef come in to barbecue for them. Right. And then I led them through a Glenlivet tasting. And it was a Glenlivet tasting of like high-end marks. It wasn't like you're just your average beater. So
that's so creative.
Not that there is average with Glenlivet, you know, but you know.
Good brand plug. Do you guys ever do stuff together? Because Arbolaura is also part of Pernod, right?
When we started, we did a lot of stuff.
Oh,
together.
in real life, we did.
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff together.
We were allowed to do that.
And then also, you know, because she is national, so I still do help if people have questions about Arbolaura. So, you know, I still do the training. So it's still in the portfolio, but she's the jefe.
Yeah. Very, very cool. All right. So now, like we talked about, well, we managed to go into what you guys are doing with COVID, which I think is kind of interesting because it is. How are you supporting accounts now? If you do go to an account, like, well, what are you feeling like they need? Like, is it just spends? Is it like they need heat lamps? Like,
It's
support. Word, Elaine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you can't say that word.
Sorry. What? How do you work with your accounts? How do you work with them as a
well, for me it would be, you know, going and supporting and buying my product and making sure, you know, if I can, but you know, here we have to eat food, so we have to buy a lot of food and wait to get one drink, so which is great, but usually you know, I mean, with social distance, I go to 3 bars, I've had 3 meals. I mean, at some points I'm just like, is there anybody there that wants some food to take home? Because I'll buy it, you know, and you can take it and I'll just have the cocktail. But it shifts. I mean, each account is so unique, and a lot of the innovation has come from accounts that have put together their own tasting kits, where they're like, hey, if I put together a tasting kit, will you do a virtual training for the people that buy it? No, absolutely. All right. So what about if I do a hot toddy kit? Let's do it. So it's gone all over the place. I mean, we have accounts that are, you know, just 100% doing outdoor dining, and then we'll do outdoor trainings, and we'll do outdoor tastings. And, you know, I've been pretty impressed by the way that accounts have bounced back and, you know, are making it work. You know, I had one account that delivered to all over the Bay Area because people wanted to be a part of this virtual tasting for Redbreast, which I was like, this is amazing. And all I had to do was,
you know, I've seen some great innovation where I've seen people saying they've actually hosted virtual, like they've used the different Zoom rooms and people break out. So they would take reservations and you would actually come to their bar. So they were hosting you inside their bar, and like you would be with your friends in your little room in virtual, and like there would be groups of people and they would come and they would host you personally. So you'd be in the bar, they'd be in the bar, and they'd be hosting you in your room, and they'd had drinks, like people had ordered drinks online to their house, and the host would be sitting there talking to them and hanging out with them, and they got them, and then they would move. They'd be like, all right, I'll check back out on you in a little bit. And they would go to the next room and like literally hanging out and hosting people in their bar in a virtual setting. And people loved it. You know, they had
it's fantastic.
They really they have like lifelong memories of like, thank you so much. It was over in Hong Kong. It was incredible. He said, now I know these people, like I got to know them really well because I got to see them every day. So there's been some interesting benefits in some ways. Like, you know, I think people have expanded their what they can do. There's new revenue streams that they never had before. So I think even after this is over, they might continue that. I think. Yeah,
I mean, you know, the e-commerce thing is just blowing up, and I think we're all still figuring it out, which I can tell on a weekly basis, and it's great. It's, you know, it's actually a fun time to be. If you asked us, like we talked about a year ago, if we were going to be doing virtual tastings and virtual meetings, we'd all been like, no, I can barely do a FaceTime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would never be the, like, no, and nobody would want to. But now it's like, I think we'll want the in-person again, but I still think it'll be more normal.
Yeah, you know what I think is great about it is, you know, we do tastings for like off-premise shops, and I'll be talking to the guests, and I'm like, oh wait, you're in Hawaii, you're in New York, you're in somewhere in California, you're in Hong Kong. You know, they just have their fans from the shop, and they just come in, and I'm like, oh, you guys are global. This is amazing. So there's people from all over at different times that are joining.
That's incredible. So you're actually working with like an off-premise liquor store.
Yeah,
So are you setting it up, and they are posting out to their consumers? Because I've heard people doing this.
You know, because they have the kits that they make, and they're like, hey, can you do the education? We'll sell the bottles, just do the education. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So then they'll send them the Zoom link to me, and then I come in and I'm like, thank you for joining us for Glenlivet, or for whatever brand it may be. And that's the good thing. So with a lot of the shops, they're like, you have so many brands, we can use you every other week, and it's great, you know, because I've learned and I've met, and from some of these tastings, because here we're in tech heaven. So from these tastings, got a lot of leads into doing VIP tastings and other for just private companies and private consumers. So it's been great, you know, because people do want that camaraderie, and we're bringing it back to them with this education. So it's still, I think that was that missing link. You know, we miss being around people. And like you said, breaking out into those rooms, being able to bullshit with people, it's awesome. It's great. Sorry.
No, absolutely. No, and so for you, like, just one more nerdy question: are you able? So, are they sending out like a blast to all their customers? So they have a customer database, right? So I'm assuming it has to be a liquor store that's a little more established, that they have been doing this for a while, like they have a good database.
Well, to be honest with you, some of them are figuring it out just like we are. So I mean, you know, the shop that I'm dealing with right now is a very like, it would be like Park Avenue Liquor in New York. They're established and they're kind of like, you know, when you go in there, you're just like, I don't know. They're the beautiful selection, but they can be curmudgeon-y.
Yes.
Until you talk to them, and then they loosen up. But since this has happened, their shop has been so amazing at this virtual setup. They get the kits together, they send it up, and they're just like, hey, can you be on this at this time? And you just do the education? Absolutely. You know, and so they're wonderful. And it's just, I mean,
so they've had to adjust. They had to, because they have to send it out to people. Obviously,
they have to send it out. And sometimes it's hard because, I mean, right now we're running out of products, which is a good thing and a bad thing, you know. So they're like, you know, because a lot of these people are now here in California, we're allowed to sell 50 mLs and 100 mLs and at the bars. And so people now can ship these.
Oh, really?
And so, you know, it depends too, because if you're shipping in California, it's fine. And California can ship to certain states. Certain states they can't. So, we even have people that can't get the kits that'll just join in because they want to listen. So, you know, it's just because I think it's more because they want to learn, and they're learning. I mean, I did one last night and it went really well. I mean, it was fantastic. And this morning I woke up with 7 emails asking if they can do one. And the thing is that like they're set up through the off premise. And so I call him and I'm like, hey, I have all these. And he's like, oh my God, I don't know if we're going to be able to do, which is okay. You know, I can go to other shops or we can figure it out. But since this is like Christmas time, everyone's like, can we do it before Christmas? And I'm like, I don't know.
No, I think that is amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. And Gemma, you said now that you're able to do so many more of these, like you're doing like 4 or 5 in a day with these consumer events for like different companies, right? Like Google, Facebook, and you would never be able to do that in normal time. You do one.
Never, ever. You would do, on those weeks that I would have been traveling, I possibly could have done in around everything else that was scheduled, possibly 2 in a day. And that would have been pushing it. But usually it was like 1 consumer event. And that wouldn't have even been 5 days a week, you know, it would be like maybe you got 3 consumer events for the entire week. Now we're getting like 3, 4, 5 every single day because you can turn off your Zoom and you can click right onto the next link.
It must be exhausting though. That's a lot.
It sounds really silly to say that it's exhausting because you're not doing anything. You're sitting still. You're not walking around or doing anything. But it's mentally, it is tiring mentally. But it's also invigorating as well. You know, sometimes you're like, oh, I've got 2 more to go. I'm tired. And then you get on and you're like, woo, because the customers that are on the other side are so energetic and so happy to be there. So it's great. It's going really well.
No, that's fantastic. So, and I remember we talked about the fact that like sometimes, you know, they buy the product, sometimes you're donating the products, or like, so they're setting up, no, they're just whatever you're doing. It
depends on the situation. So there are groups, I think, last time we discussed, there's like groups that have lots of money that like to purchase full bottles for their clients or their potential clients, and they'll send them one whole bottle of whiskey. Or there's other groups that we can send kits to them more like this, so they would get
cool. That. Yeah,
so this is obviously Redbreast, but a kit like that they would be able to taste a couple of smaller things, you know, 3 different versions, and taste through that way, and they are just multi-branded,
multi-passing, multi-promoting your brands. No, I think that's great. No, because it is no matter what, even if they're purchasing or not. I mean, obviously purchasing it was better because it's promoting sales, but even if they're just tasting it, if they're able to, then it's probably then leading to them like, all right, now I had this experience. They feel more connected to the brand, so they're more likely to buy it. They have an emotional connection because they've met you.
Very, very emotional. It's much more. I found that in a real life situation, it's great, and there's so much to be said for real life interactions. But a lot of times people check out mentally. They're there in the room, but they're not really there. You know, they've like said, "Oh, I have to come to this," or "My boss is going to be there," whatever. When it's on Zoom or it's on whatever platform you're using, they're choosing to be there. They're choosing to take an hour out of their day, or 45 minutes, 60 minutes. They have the kits. Not everybody turns up. It's not like every single person always turns up. Sometimes life happens and they can't, and they'll email and say, "Oh, bummer, I missed it," whatever. But the people that do tune in are much more engaging, I find, and they're sitting like this on the screen, like tell me more, and they're chatting in the chat section. They're asking loads of questions. Great. So it's more like, I think people are much more comfortable because they're in their own home. Right. So they're like, I don't need to engage, but I want to. And if I don't want to, I'm not going to. But if they really don't want to be bothered, they're not going to come on the screen. You know, they'll just not tune in. So the people that are on are just.
It would be great if you could track, like, if they do, like, if you could do, like, you know, tracking of all the liquor stores and just being able to see like the results. But you know, that's in a just to see how many people, like, they go, like, where's your favorite shop? Where are you shopping?
We have like national data. So we've been able to see from the start of COVID and the start of our change in our programming, we've been able to see the numbers growing in the
that's fantastic.
So it's obviously not like 100% accurate all of the time, but it's positive. It's been positive for us. So we are seeing that like trickle through effect, that even if they are just tasting a kind of sample version, that eventually it is going through into the stores. And especially now, you know, it's holiday time.
They have that bottle in hand, and it's like it's a constant reminder. If it's sitting in their room, if it's sitting on their bar, if it's sitting in their office, they're like, "Oh, that was so good! I got to get a bottle of it." You know? And if they're getting a full bottle, that's even more. Like they can study it, they can take their time with it. It's great. It's been working out really well.
Oh, that's great. And I love the fact you said that you're running out of small, like the little 200 mLs, because I always heard that companies don't really make any money off of 200 ml. Like, it costs more to produce the 200.
I think they're the greatest thing. And as a person that ran a shop, we had a selection of them, and people came in especially for those because we were in the financial district, so people can use those nips in their purses and, you know, take them, and they can have really good whiskey or really good gin. Exactly. I mean, I don't know, you know, put it in their coffees, you know. So it has helped. It has helped a lot.
It would be interesting because I've heard in one of the things happening in hard seltzers and canned cocktails is they've run out of cans.
They've run out of cans. Yeah.
They've run out of cans, and it's not that there's not enough aluminum. There's just not enough. The factories aren't built enough to keep up with the demand. So people are building new factories. So it'd be really funny to be like the war of the 200 mLs and the cans, like, you know, who gets the market faster. So, all right. So you two have moved a few times in your life. And I bring this up because moving is, as somebody who's never moved, really, I've been living in New York my entire life. And until my daughter goes off to college, I will probably be staying here in New York for a while. And it is something that obviously can change your life for the better, or it can be really stressful. So, Gemma, you've moved countries. You moved to New York. Dominic, you moved from San Francisco to New York, and now you both have moved to California. So, Gemma, what did you see like the benefit of, like, how did it change your world? Like, do you feel like it's broadened your eyes, made you a better person, like, you know, just by moving, like taking that risk?
It's hard to describe, actually. You can't quantify how much it actually does change your life. And yes, whether it's good or bad, you know, it's like every experience in life, you learn something from it, whether it's the worst thing that's ever happened in your life or the best thing that's ever happened, you learn from it. Moving from Ireland to New York was super exciting. It was like, oh, what am I doing? This is crazy. This is like living in New York City. This is crazy, you know.
And you were about to get your MBA. You're about to go to school to get your MBA, right? And like that's a
yeah,
big, like that's a
that
big
was my
choice.
that was my balance. Like, oh, I've got accepted into this course, and I have an offer to move to New York. What should I do? And I was sort of like, be sensible, Gemma. Do your masters. And the other side of me was like, when is this opportunity gonna come again? You know, that you can go somewhere, that you've got a job lined up, that you've got people, that, you know, it wasn't like moving to a place like completely alone. I had a structure in place. So it was like,
Right.
if I don't take this opportunity now, it's going to pass and I'll probably end up regretting it. So, and I can do my master's anytime if I wanted to.
If you wanted to, which I think is very brave. But you said moving to California was more
Scary.
nerve-wracking. Yeah. Why
Yeah,
was it scarier?
I think because I was older. So I think moving to New York was like fresh out of university. I just finished my degree. I was like ready to take on the world, and didn't really have any responsibilities or anything. Not that I really had responsibilities when I moved to California either, but I had a network. I'd been working there for so many years. I was it eight,
Mm-hmm.
almost
Yeah.
9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of friends, people that I could rely on, you know, like if you need something, you've got X amount of people that you can call, you being one of them.
Yeah.
I could, like, if something happened, and
Yeah.
it did happen, that I had people to call on and lean on.
Now you just had Dom.
Although Dom has like obviously a big connection here, I didn't know a whole lot of people. So it was like, oh, I feel like I'm starting out fresh again. I'm starting like clean slate again, not really knowing anybody. But because my role is national, it also gave me that opportunity to be, I could have lived anywhere, you know. So It was like, again, when am I going to have the opportunity to do this? Because my job allows me to live anywhere in the country. If I wasn't in this position, I wouldn't physically be able to move to California so easily. So it was kind of like the universe is talking to me.
No, I do believe it. I just talked somebody into moving from Canada to California with their significant partner, and and she called me up, and I was very honored that she called me to ask for advice. She's like, Elaine, you were the first person I thought of, like, what's the downside, what's the upside, and kind of like talking through. I'm like, it's an opportunity. I'm like, you can always move back. I'm like, and this is an opportunity. It was her partner in life. It's not her husband, but her partner. And she, and it's a big job for him. And I was like, just have honest conversations. Like, he's going to have to support you for a while because you're going to have to get a new job. Like, this is like, and, it's just working through those things, but it is scary. And I remember you saying, like, sometimes just having senior people tell you it's okay. Like you were saying, some people in Ireland said, no, it's okay. Go. Go.
That was my mom, like, practically shoved me on the plane to New York the first time. She's regretting it now, almost 10 years later. She's still like, every day, you think you're going to move back to Ireland anytime? Anytime? I'm like, you did this.
But it's also changed your career, right? You were able to advance in your career. And before we go into that, because I want to talk about like moving up in your career and taking those risks of changing companies. Some people get a little afraid about that. And Dominic, you moved also. You went to East Coast back to West Coast. And I'm assuming it enhanced your network and gave you different experiences.
It did. I mean, I didn't ever think I'd leave California at that point where I was 12 years ago. I was, madly in love with my state. I had left before and went to Hawaii, which was wonderful, but had gotten the bartending bug there and came back to San Francisco and just kind of hit it. And, I was really happy and established, but at the same time, I got in a relationship with someone from New York. And after a year, we had decided that, why not move? And at the place that I was in San Francisco, I just felt kind of stagnant in my advancement. And I had an opportunity to work in New York at some places like Tippler, and then help open Basic, and then eventually Nomad, which was amazing and great. And, I'm just bartending. I'm not in charge of any programs. I'm not doing anything. So this is what I wanted to get back into. And it was just fun because, in New York, where I had come, in the years before, and I had guest bartended at like Death & Co. or Painkiller, and it was great. And I saw it and got the vibe of New York and was like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. So the transition was kind of easy for me. I did have nice little friends in New York that was already established. So getting there was it was a kind of a smooth transition. And, I did miss California a lot at the beginning, but New York kind of wrapped itself around me. And, I didn't think I would be there as long as I ended up staying. I was only supposed to be there for maybe a year at the most. And 8 years later,
did you find you grew, like, did you learn new techniques here? Like you were saying,
absolutely, 100%. I mean, to this day, I always tell people I'm still learning things. You still have to study techniques. You're still learning about what's going on. So yeah, absolutely. Because you have two different beasts. You have California that has produce year round. That's beautiful and gorgeous. New York has great produce too, but it's very seasonal, right? Yes. And you also have a very classic New York bar scene that's very, I would say, at that time it was very classic cocktail driven. Still kind of is, right? Or at least the cocktails are made in that very spiritual side. Here in California, you had a lot of people that were making a lot of fruit driven, muddled, I shouldn't say muddled, but there's a lot of innovation here. You have a lot of different flavor profiles that people can use with the spirits. So my style was more of the old school classic cocktails playing with spirits. I mean, I'm a spirit nerd, I should say junkie, first and foremost. I'm just a spirits junkie with a cocktail like habit. Like, I kind of like cocktails. It's great, but it was more about getting into a new thing, and going into New York was wonderful. And I mean, I just got very lucky with the places that I ended up.
No, which is amazing, because it is a big experience, like, making that transition and changing, and even changing jobs. Like a lot of people I know, myself included, I worked for Diageo with all the brands there for almost 17 years. Yeah, that's how old I am. I did many different roles, and then I became their head mixologist and brand ambassador. And I did that for a long time, too long. And I started getting bored and stagnant and stuff like that. So I was very grateful when I got the opportunity to change complete positions and go to Anheuser-Busch and became a global manager and more corporate. And I realized I also didn't like that world as much as I thought I would. So, but I think there's a thing. GEMMA, you've worked for a couple of different companies. So for yourself, do you find you learn at each place and you're bringing new experiences, and it's worth kind of maybe staying in a place for a certain period of time, but maybe growing and moving to the next role, and so you find that ultimate job?
Yeah, definitely. My first brand position was with William Grant, actually. It's a family-owned company. And I was heartbroken leaving them, because it was my first corporate job. Although it was a brand ambassador position, it was still not a bartender or a server position. And when I worked there, it was very much a family kind of atmosphere. So I was really sad and scared to be leaving, but also the opportunity came again. There was an opportunity to move to Pernod Ricard, and the big corporate, publicly traded company. And I was like, oh, I don't know, what's it going to be like? I'm going from this small family-owned, close-knit community to this big operation. Am I going to enjoy it? And there's only one way to find out. So I took that position and learned so much in that, and that maybe I could have learned if I hadn't stuck around. Maybe, my progression would have been different. But for me, it was like a quick learning curve, because those two companies are so different from each other in their ways of working and their kind of corporate structure and company ethos, and everything is just different. So it was frightening, but it was worth it.
Right. And then also, hopefully the money was different. Every time you move companies, you should keep getting more money. That's the goal.
You should.
You should. And
that's the other thing when you're in. Yeah, when you're in, if you stay with one company for 17 years, it's so much harder for you to kind of prove your worth or try to get more, you know, you get that like annual little bump that everybody
bump.
gets.
Yeah, I used to have to fight really hard. I fought really, really hard, and I kept changing roles. But then when I got put in, I moved many, many times. I went from marketing to events and whatever. And then when I got to that head role, I mean, they didn't have a corporate mixologist. I created the job out of nothing. They didn't know what a mixologist was. It was 2005. They were like, what is that? And why do we need one? So I was like, here it is. And I'm going to do it. I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I'm going to figure it out. But you have to fight a lot harder. And when you move roles, and this is something I tell people when I did my personal branding seminar, was don't ever tell corporations how much money. They'll ask you how much money you made your last job. Lie. Just so
I don't think they're actually allowed to do that. I think that's illegal.
They're now making it illegal, which I hope they are, but I don't know if it's illegal in every state, because they will base your new salary on whatever you made in your last job and only add on 20%. So I always add on an extra 40,000 to my salary, and then so that's what I learned, because they never check.
You need to put in like a speech bubble.
Yeah. So if you have somebody ever asked you, if anybody's watching this, always add on at least another 20 grand to whatever your salary is, because they're going to add 20% to that. So just so you know, no, that's great. And yeah, exactly. So Dominic, I asked you, both of you guys. So like we talked about this before, and I thought it was really interesting. You know, you've worked for different companies. There are definitely some things I'm sure you've seen companies do really wrong. And one of the things you guys mentioned was like change the role completely. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like what is the biggest mistake you've seen companies make with brand ambassadors that you've worked with? And you're like,
well, you know, I've worked with companies like, well, I can't say, but you know, I've worked with some big companies and I've worked with some small companies before I took the Pernod job. And, you know, I think we talked about it earlier. And the one thing that I found was, I got it hired, and it was for my first full-time brand ambassador role about 13 years ago. And it was a great position. It was fantastic. The other two ambassadors were from London, and they, you know, kind of asked me to join, and it was a product coming into the United States. It was a great opportunity. And then after I got hired, about 3 to 6 months later, they got sold. And they got sold to someone that wanted to see numbers for this product. And they made me into a sales rep as well as kind of an ambassador. But the sales rep role was pretty intense. And, you know, I was kind of in a contract, so I couldn't just quit. Right. So I just went to the end of my contract doing, you know, learning about that, I should say, because I was coming from on and off premise. So I understood the sales role. It was just, I don't think I was good as bullshitting about the product as some of these salespeople can be. But
it is hard, right? Why do you think it's hard? Why do you think it's hard? Like, because people say to me, like, and I've had this conversation just yesterday, you know, a brand ambassador role is sales. Like, you are a salesperson. I'm like, not every role is the same. And I do think there's a hard part. If you are a brand ambassador or a mixologist, you feel pride of the product you're selling, right? So like you have this thing. So trying to like be swarmy and try to like,
I work with some amazing salespeople, and I don't think they're swarmy at all. They just have a different delivery. Whereas I'm more of the educator, right? So I'm just nerding out on what's in the bottle, what the bottle is, how you can use it. And then they're like, well, what do I get on a 6-case drop? And I'm like, I don't care. It's not my business. You know, I mean, I understand. And I do know like the frontline price and that, just so I can understand. But like when it comes to those things, I always tell people, I'm like, our role is the educator. If I have worked for some brands that do want you to do that and have kind of that knowledge, and it's great. And so for those brands, I would to come in and be like, yeah, because we would work with, say, like Empire as a brand ambassador for many brands, but they didn't really have, like with Pernod, we have specialists that work within Southern, right? Right. We didn't have that with Empires, and they didn't really care about us. They were like, you're some little small brand that is in our portfolio. Right. I could give a shit. But once they see traction coming, and you know, when you're pretty much as that ambassador in that situation, you're doing everything. Now, like with our situations, we have managers that help us. We have people that help us, you know, and you know this, when you show up to an event and you're making the drinks, you're making the punch, you're getting everything prepared, you're putting a table together. And, you know, when I took this position, I was like, all right, what do we need to do? And they're like, we got people doing that.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Oh my God. Just
we
focus on education. Yeah. And it's great, but it was also a great thing to come with smaller brands where you have to put in that work, where you have to, that's what's part of the great part of being an ambassador. And I always tell young ambassadors, they're like, well, how do I get it? And I was like, well, to be honest with you, I've bartending for almost 25 years, and I really did not want to step out from behind the bar. I love being behind the bar. I love that. And I was like, I think people just need more bar experience, as much bar experience before you become I understand brand ambassador jobs. And I was a victim of that. I took a brand ambassador job quick after like 10 years. And it was quick at that time, I should say. Kids nowadays take them really quick. Yeah. And I went back to bartending full time, and I was like, no, that's not what I wanted to do. It was after that role that I was just explaining that I was like, no, I'm going back behind the bar. And it's more of a, I learned more. I kept going, and it's more because you're not just, you can be pigeonholed with one brand. With what I have a portfolio, so it's amazing that I get to work with all of these different brands and learn about their education and talk about it. So when you have one brand, which it's been a while since I just had one brand, right. It can be
nice to be an expert on one brand. Like Gemma gets to be like the person. And I was gonna say, that is a shock. I always hear people say that because they come from being behind the bar, they become a brand ambassador, and it's nothing what they thought it would be.
No, it's never going to be. It's not like
they see corporate card and travel, and it's so exciting. And it is, of course it is, but they don't see everything that happens behind, you come home at night, you close your door, and all of the other stuff that has to go on before you get on the plane and get to do all the fancy events. Yeah. So I think that's...
What are the unsexy things about being a brand ambassador? Like what's the least sexiest part of your job?
Well, I mean, expenses, reports. I would say our reports.
Yeah.
I know there's much more unsexier stuff.
Maybe just answering emails, like, right? You have to.
No, I don't mind.
That's a big one. Yeah, being responsive, timely, being responsive to emails. That if you're bartending, you're used to different hours of working. You're not used to having to be like, replying to an email right away, or especially things being time sensitive.
Our bosses are in New York, so our phones are already like by 8 a.m. messages and emails. So, you're
already behind, and you can't.
We're already behind.
It's like sometimes you have to be out really late. I always say you have to be like a business professional and a part-time partier combined, because you need to be able to hang, but you need to be able to get up and be ready to go at 9 a.m. in the morning, if not earlier, which is what people don't expect. Like sometimes they're like, "What? That's not part of the brand ambassador."
Which I tell people, I'm like, I understand. Like a young brand ambassador in their late 20s, they have that juice. They have that. They can stay out all night. They can get up early in the morning. And they may have a headache, but they're not going to be as wrecked as like for me. Now it's like 2 days where I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. Yeah, no, I can't do it anymore. I'm too.
But I am a night owl, and I do like staying out. I'm just taking a little more off the drinking and staying out late and kind of balancing it out. But you learn also about drinking more water, not needing to drink cocktails all the time. Right. It's great because we do just have...
hold that thought, because I was going to say my question was going to be next. If you could go back, right, when you first started, like what are some hard lessons you had to learn on the job?
Oh, I could tell you.
Got trained on, or you just like wish somebody had told you?
My first brand that I got hired for as an ambassador, I had to go to this meeting, and it was an LVMH product, and they had taken me out, and because I had just gotten hired and they were in San Francisco, they take me out, and all the bars we're going to, I know the bartenders, and so they're making cocktails. So I'm like drinking every cocktail, and they're like, all right, we got to be 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. I had a rough morning. I showed up, and the woman next to me was like, you didn't have to drink every cocktail. You just take a drink. You don't have to drink them. And I was like, but they're my friends. I can't disrespect them and not drink these drinks. But I learned fast. I learned, all right, yeah, you don't need to. You just want to get those depletions, right? But you do feel like sometimes you felt too much, and as you get more into this position, you realize you don't want to get high off your own supply. You don't want to be. You're trying to set an example and not be belligerent as you're going out. And I know there's those special occasions where things happen. But most of the time, it's like you don't want to get crazy, especially because you're going into accounts where they want to like you and you want them to love you. So you don't want to be disrespectful in their accounts. You don't want to get too drunk. And that was as a bartender, when I would see brand ambassadors, and I was like, you should go home. You should really go home right now. Don't go anywhere else. Yeah. Go home. Yeah. I'm telling you this just for your own good. You shouldn't go to any other accounts.
Yeah. You're a good man. Gemma, is there any lessons you learned, like you wish somebody taught you before or trained you on it and you're like, oh, why did I do that?
That is definitely one that I learned pretty fast as well. You know, you feel like you have to drink at every place that you go, especially when you're building relationships. Sometimes it's not like in for one drink. You have to sit and kind of like scope out the place and figure out who's in charge and all that kind of stuff. There's much more efficient ways of finding that information than having 3 drinks at the bar. So that was something that I learned that
what would be more efficient?
Wasn't taught.
Yeah, instead of sitting at the bar, like what would you do instead?
The other way. So it's and this is different for every company as well. So depending on which company you work for, they'll kind of guide you in a certain direction. And I think I was guided a little bit more in the like, be everybody's friend, be friends with everybody, and eventually the cases will come. You know, like it takes a long time for that to happen versus find out who the sales rep is, find out what time they meet with the buyer, go in, meet with the buyer and shake their hand in the middle of the day, not have a drink with them.
Yes.
And then come back at a different time that you've already made those key relationships in a more kind of professional way, I suppose. And then you can come back in and make friends with everyone else at that stage. That was a big learning for me. It actually took quite a long time to get to like put all the pieces together that this is more effective to do it this way.
No, that's a huge learning. Like being productive and learning how to create a productive week. Like when I was training, I train in brand ambassadors. Like I have them like create, like, what's your plan for the week? Like, what is your plan? Like sit down and have a goal. What's your goal for the week? Like I'm going to hit, these accounts, and what is your goal in each account? I want to I've never been there before. So I'm going to go in and scope out what the back bar is and what they're doing. So I know like the conversation when I do meet the buyer and find out who the buyer is. And same thing, maybe find out who the sales rep is and whatever it is. Like have a goal, like, oh, if I go here, I know Freddie's working on this day. So I'm going to have the conversation with him about the menu placement. Like, so it's like looking at your week and where you're going to go rather than just wandering. Because that can happen. Suddenly you just know you've been out for days and you're like, I didn't get anything accomplished, but I have lots of receipts.
But I drank at every bar.
I drank at every bar. That relate not that conversation. But no, that's a really good point. Like getting those sales reps so you can know when they're going to meet the bar and saying, hey, I don't need a whole day of work with. I just want to come meet you at 2 to meet with this person. So that's a really,
because ultimately they're the one taking the order.
Yes.
They're the one pulling the trigger at the end. So if you're not, you don't know who that person is, you're like, it's an uphill battle at that stage.
Yes, no, absolutely. And then you're just wasting time. You're just sitting there, you're going night after night and you're just talking to the same bartender or a different bartender and you haven't met the one person you really need to know. So it does take a while. Like I try to sometimes explain to brands, I'm like, it might take 3 or 4 visits before I actually, like, if you don't know the sales rep, you don't have that reputation, like that relationship with them yet. Because sometimes sales reps just ignore you. Right? They're like, yeah, I don't know who you are and I don't want you to meet my buyer.
Well, that's actually, something that I make sure, because especially being new to or brand new again to California and coming back to where, when I left the market, I did work with Southern and Young's market here a lot. So I was very familiar with the sales reps and still see them on the floor and on the ground and everywhere. But I came back and I was like, I want to be involved in GSMs. I want to get involved with them and I want them to see my face and know that they can call on me. And when they see me out, that they can use me. And so, I love doing GSMs where people are always like, why? And I was like, because it's my only chance that I can actually talk shit to the sales rep. General sales meeting.
Yes, right. Yes. How to use my and KPIs, by the way, we didn't explain key performance indicators. They have how they measure your performance. No, but GSM, this is important. Yeah, tell me.
It's very important, and it's
how do you work the GSM? How do you like work it? Like how do you network?
I work the room. I mean, it's because I tell them, put your phone down, look at me, I'm talking to you, and if I see them on the phone, I usually stand next to them and I'll make some wise ass remark and make people laugh, and then I'll just say, what did I say? I'm here to help you sell this product. I don't want you. I'm like, because most of my brands are heritage brands, so we're not going anywhere. We're not Wasabi Vodka. We're not going to disappear. We're not going to go around. I know that you have a huge portfolio and you have a lot to look after, but just pay attention for 5 minutes. I'm giving you this time because you may never see me again. And because also, you know, we have chains, we have our regular sales reps, we have, you know, so I got to talk to all on, off chains and make sure that they just know that I'm here, I'm in market, they can lean on me. And just giving them that information, it's like the next day I get a bunch of emails. Oh, thanks for that. I have an account. And I'm like, I always tell them the same thing that you just said. Just let me know where it is. I'll drop in. You don't need to go in with me. You don't need to make an introduction. I can introduce myself. It's actually better if I am by myself because I don't want to be like with Michael Cohen as I go into this account, you know. They're like, great, here comes the rep, you know, and because we know how that is being behind the bar. It's like, oh, great, here comes our reps, and they brought somebody with them.
Again. Yeah.
You know, so there's ways.
How do you establish your authority with them? Because if they don't know you, because the biggest thing I know that reps have is that if they're worried that you're not as talented as they might like think. So they're like, well, you're the whiskey ambassador, but how do I know? Like until I went on Bar Rescue, they were like, they didn't know how to explain me. And they were like, oh, she's from Bar Rescue. And then that's all the explanation they needed, and accounts wanted to see. As sad as that is, as pathetic as that is, that was their explanation. So for you as the whiskey ambassador, like, do you have to be like, well, this is my years of experience? Like, did you send them a bio?
I mean, sometimes, I mean, I don't ever tell them any bar experience at all, unless they ask, you know, because I don't want to, my biggest thing as a bartender is having people critique the way that I bartend. So
No. I mean, like the reps, like, because Gemma, you're a gorgeous, beautiful blonde, and you're coming in as this whiskey rep. And I'm sure some of the old school whiskey, like sales reps are like, really? You know about whiskey?
Well, that was the thing for me. So like
just talking over the top of me.
The mansplaining, the mansplaining that just happened there.
Yeah, that's just something that you have to deal with. And
well, how do you establish your authority? Like, how do they know?
No, they know as soon as you start speaking, and you know, if it's a staff training or if it's a 5 minutes with a buyer and you get a chance to explain, and they are actually listening to what you're saying, then they know that you're legit and that you're educated and whatever. But you know, everybody judges. We all do it. We don't like to think that we do it, but everybody does it. So I try to not like take it, you know, too much to heart, and try to get to know the sales reps as well. Like, I want to know about them. If I'm going to work with them, I want to know what their kids' names are and like what they like to do at the weekends, and be personable with them, because they see so many brand ambassadors over and over and over, and they get sick of doing these work withs, and they are burnt out from having to take someone around all the time. So it's kind of like, as an ambassador, it's on us as well to make their experience a little bit better, and you know, like, be gentle with them as well, because we know that they're doing it constantly. Like, they might have 3 more brand ambassadors in their car this week. So
right, and getting in work with,
and we're all working for the same thing. We all want the same thing, so we can work together.
No, that's great. And Dom, I like the fact that you worked at GSMs, because it is important, and you don't always get to do a presentation up front. So you're saying you work the room, because I'm assuming you don't get to do.
Because like when you talk about going into accounts or anything, or making that relationship with the sales rep, most of the time in our markets, we have a Pernod specialist. So the Pernod specialist already has the relationship. So when I go in there, they're like, oh, Tim just sends you in? Oh, that's the guy. He explained who you are. All right, cool. And it's usually, there's usually that buffer zone where someone comes in, but there are places that I do cold call, and I'll go in and I'll just slowly explain, like she said, I'll just do the pitch. I'll talk to them about the brands, and I'll also talk to them about other brands, because the geek in me will be like, all right, so you have such and such. Do you have these ones? Did you do this ones? How come you have so many space sides and no Isla? Or you know, I'll just read it and they'll be like, oh.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important knowing your category, so you understand what the competitors are and what you're doing, so you can have that conversation with them, so they know that you appreciate the category. You're not just about your brand, and that you're also you know there's a gap in their portfolio that you can help enhance, and it's not just, I'm going to try to jam this product into your bar and it doesn't really fit here. But if they know that you're like, no, all right, you get my bar, you get my concept, and you're not just trying to sell me something that has no place to be here. Like, this actually could be an enhancement to where I am.
Exactly. I mean, a good example is like Redbreast, because I go into bars and I'm like, So your Irish whiskey list just says Irish whiskey. It doesn't say single grain, single malt, blend, single pot still. And you have nothing but blends. You don't have any single malts. You don't have any single pot still. So how does this reflect on your whiskey category? And they're like, oh, you know, most of them, a lot of, I mean, I shouldn't say most of them, a lot just are like, oh, wow, I never really thought about that, but I thought it was just all one, you know. So it starts the conversation, which is great.
Yeah. And I'm sure it helps you also, maybe you can offer to also develop their list, like, hey, I'll help you break it down for you. I'll do the
absolutely, and that's fun stuff.
That is the fun stuff. That's when we really get to show our acknowledge. I was gonna say, and the one other thing before, because where are we? We have a few more minutes.
I think we're good too.
You guys work really well with the brand teams. Like you work with your brand team. So did you always, with every job you've ever had, like brands, did you always work directly with the brand teams, or?
I had a few different versions of different roles. The first BA job I had was a big team. So there was lots of brand ambassadors, and I felt very much part of, like I said, it was with William Grant, and it was a family kind of atmosphere. But it definitely felt like a brand ambassador world, I suppose, as opposed to like a brand world. I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
No.
Where so if I look at it now, the position that I'm in now, although we have other ambassadors as well, that we're all very close in the same. It's like feels like a family. I have much more visibility and actually the whole team, we all have visibility as to numbers, how we're getting to those numbers, planning out like fiscal years in advance, all of the scary stuff that I never understood years ago when I first started. Also because I didn't really have eyes on it then, and I didn't know what questions to ask because I didn't have the information. So with each kind of job that I took along the way, I learned a little bit more about the overall brand process. And luckily now my brand manager used to be a brand ambassador. So I think that is a great thing for us, because I think a lot of times brand managers that don't have BA experience, I think, and not to coat everyone with the same brush, but I think when you come from a brand ambassador background, you see the value in it.
Yes.
You see the value of brand ambassadors and how impactful they can be. And if you don't come from that world, you might look at them like this massive expense that you can't really quantify what they're doing. So luckily,
so do you
for
find
us,
yourself you're working with them? No, it's such a great point, and it's so great that your brand manager appreciates that, because they understand the value you're bringing. So as a brand ambassador, if they want to get to know their brand manager, like one of the things I always recommend is like, ask them like, hey, can I sit in some meetings? Can I get to know a little bit more about like what your job and what your goals are? So that maybe when I'm in the streets, I can help you. Like I can see things like competitive information, or I can see pricing, so I can give you back knowledge, and I can kind of be your eyes and ears for you if I understand what you want to progress. So it's
yes, the more information that for us, I think that our little team, we're constantly like loving each other, because we're like, this is great, we've got so much information, but we also know what is expected of the brand.
Yes,
coming from the very, very top, we know what's expected, because we are given the information on a regular basis. This is what we need to achieve. These are the numbers that we need to hit. This is what we think the plan might be of how we're going to achieve all of this. And because we have eyes on that information, then we can, as a team, we can all work together properly, instead of being like, you're the brand ambassador, this is your job in this little box. And then we are the PR company, and that's your box. And you stay in your box. No one communicates. We're all in it together.
No, I think
we're sharing information.
It makes you also feel part of like it. You're all responsible, so you're all working together, and it's like you probably feel more like, this is my brand. Like I want to help it achieve their goals. I'm going to help this brand manager hit their targets because they respect what I'm doing and they're including me. And you're working together. It's like, oh, that's not. If you have me doing this thing, it's not going to help us get there. So you can have that honest conversation. Like if somebody asked you to do something stupid, and you can be like, this person wants me to do this thing, like, but it's not going to allow us to hit the target, because I'm sure you get asked random requests sometimes. And it's like, if your brand manager has your back and be like, no, that's not part of our target, that's not going to help us. So I think that's really great. And Dominic, do you work with you work with multiple brands. So do you work with any of the?
Yeah. And I mean, a couple of the brands have the same brand manager. And I would say since we went from, since I've been with Pernod now for 4 years, the first 2 years were with an agency with Legacy. So we had our direct manager that dealt with our brand team. Right. Now that we've been brought in-house, we do have more access to the brand team. And in fact, they've been starting to work with us more. So now they're bringing us into meetings. They realize that we do have a lot of great things to say and to add. And also we're friends with a lot of our brand managers. So there is within our work, we have to I have to address my manager, who then addresses them before I can go around them. But they still reach out to me on a text and be like, hey, what do you think about this? So I do have access to them. We do talk, and we've all been working together for a long time. So some of them have even gone to another brand, but are still in-house. So yeah, we do work together with them, and it's great. I would say within my BA history, it's probably been more so with Pernod than any other brands.
No, I think that's great. It is the ideal way of working. So one of the last questions is, all right, so what is some of your anxieties about being every brand ambassador? We have anxieties, right? Like you are, or is these jobs so perfect? Like being a brand ambassador, like for me, I always felt like my anxiety was I wasn't working hard enough, because sometimes your job is just so nice. Like you're just you're out there, you're working with accounts, you're doing whatever, and you're like, I get paid to do this. Am I doing enough? Do they know what I'm doing? Am I reporting enough? Are they going to be one day going, well, she's not doing anything, even though you're working really hard? That was my own stupid anxiety. Do you have any anxiety, Gemma, worries?
I feel like everyone has that anxiety. No matter what your job is, I think. Well, not everyone, obviously. Some people think that they're wonderful, but most people, I would say, think the same thing, especially in a corporate setting, because there's so much going on all the time that you're do people know what I'm doing? Especially when you're working from home 100% of the time now. And you have to have the trust in your team. Everybody has to trust each other to know nobody's slacking, nobody's having to pick up after someone else, because you learn that really quickly. If somebody actually isn't working, you would know. You would be getting snarky emails or texts or whatever. But I think that's just wanting to be the best, right? You want not necessarily the best in the business, but the best version of yourself. And it's a good thing. Anxiety's good in a certain degree, right? To push you on, to keep you motivated, but you don't want too much of it. You don't want to be debilitating anxiety that you can't actually turn your computer on because you have too many unread messages.
Yes. No, and also if you had a big night the night before and you slept until 10 because and then you're oh my God, did I sleep too long? I should have, but it's you went to bed at 3 a.m. because you had some big event and you just worked your ass off, and and you should be able to get a proper night's sleep so that you can do your job. You were working, I don't, it's just weird. It's a weird job. And sometimes there is that weird anxiety, because then you got those texts from your boss and you're I only went to bed at 3 because I was working the event until 3, and but you shouldn't feel that anxiety, and a good boss would let you know that.
Yeah, exactly.
Dominic, do you have any, is there anything?
Well, I mean, for me, the anxiety, I think, comes from not being out and not being around my accounts and not being able to see everybody, and worrying about Sacramento and San Diego and Los Angeles and San Jose, and not being able to get to, now we're closing here on the 6th. So there's the anxiety. I think it's more because of what's going on. And of course, yes, I'm very worried about our positions, but more so because we are the faces and we are the soldiers for our brands that are on, with these accounts as much as we can be. The anxiety is a lot of them are closing, and it hurts. Yeah. So I'm seeing some dear friends that are losing some of their dreams. So I'm trying to fight. And I think that anxiety is coming from trying to help as much as I can. And right now it's hard for me to go into an account and say, so, I got this new whiskey, you should don't buy a case. You should just take a bottle if you can, you know. But even then, it's not even. I really don't want to. I want to help them go through what they have, and if they can order again, great. If not, let's just keep making money for them and helping them out. And even like, I mean, another anxiety is some of these people that don't have jobs and making sure that they're taken care of and that they still are all right. And, you know, I have a lot of friends in this situation. So I have a lot of anxiety from this.
Yeah,
it's just industry
right
anxiety.
now, there's a lot of anxiety. You are worried. We're worried about everybody.
I mean, I'm going gray.
Yeah. This is only dye here. You know, it's like, no, there is that constantly worried. I can't even imagine trying to go into an account and you're like, trying to ask them to buy something in, you're like, yeah.
And that's another thing. It's right. You know, I'm worried about GEMMA and being around other people and what's going on. It's like, I have 2 masks on all the time. I'm like,
I know.
Spraying everything I have.
For those of you who don't know, GEMMA's about to have a baby in January.
Yes.
So yes,
yes,
she
is. And so, you know, that's another thing. It's like, I keep my distance and, you know, sometimes you do get a little loose, but you're, you know, most of the time I'm around people that I really know well. And even if it's my reps or I know that we've been, and they also have children too. So I know that they're very attentive to what's going on. But that's a big anxiety too.
No, that's definitely a big anxiety. And I wasn't even thinking, I was so funny. It's like, it's for me, it's like such a normal thing. It's like COVID, it's anxiety and all that stuff is going on, but it's a very good point. It is. It's so much stuff going on. It's like, it's just a very strange year, and I'm looking forward to 2021.
So are we.
So are you. Interesting. All right. So last words of advice for anybody who's, let's pretend the world is normal and like it's next year and like, you know, we're going back to normal times and somebody wanting to become a brand ambassador. Any words of wisdom? Like they just became a brand ambassador and you're like, oh, somebody told me, like, I don't know, like do your expenses. What would it be like?
I think even before that, I think before they've even got the job, you should love the brand that you work for.
Yes.
That's it. For me, that's a big thing. I think a lot of people are like, it's a job. And obviously in this climate, a job's a job.
Yeah.
Take the job, start making money. But if you work for a brand that your heart's not in it, it's your job is to be in love with your brand and to make other people fall in love with it. And you can't do it genuinely. People won't take you seriously if they know that you're not fully invested in that brand.
Absolutely.
So that would be the first thing. And get your expenses in on time. I need to do that today.
Absolutely. Dominic, any
All right. Well, I would say before you take the initial job, just make sure that you love the industry enough, because you're going to see a different side from what you're used to seeing behind the bar or in the bar. Because I know not everyone from behind the bar takes BA roles. It's now being open to a lot of people. But I would just say that you love the industry. You love that you're not going to be in every world famous cocktail bar around. You're going to be in the middle of bumfuck California, Idaho, wherever you may be, at beautiful restaurants and bars, great accounts, and wonderful people. And you always have to be open to this. You can't be such a pighead. You know, some people can be and I went through this, so I understand. You can be kind of snobby about where you came from and what you know, but you have to be open to everybody's point of view, and you have to love the brand, like she said, and know everything about it. How was it developed? What's the history of it? What's the heritage? Yeah. I don't know. I think that you just really, because I think the more time you spend behind the bar, you have more experience. Because like I said, if you are going to start doing it, start part-time. You don't need to go full-time, because you may be like, oh man, I miss being behind the bar. Because once you're out from behind that bar, you don't get to go on trips anymore. You don't get to get picked up by other brands and taken out to lunches. You're now 100% part of your brand. So everything stops for you. So enjoy being behind the bar. But also, if you do take the job, just take your time with it. Don't party too much, and take pictures of your receipts.
And drink lots of water.
Drink and take pictures of your receipts.
Drink lots of water. Yes, drink lots of water.
Lots of water. But I think that's a great point. You have to. People are no longer going to be kissing your ass. You're going to be kissing their ass.
Yeah.
And all your friends that own bars, just because they love you doesn't mean they're going to take your brand in.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So be patient and just understand that. So guys, thank you so much. And thank you for doing this twice. And I'm going to take this once the recording comes in and put it up on Facebook. So, but this is amazing. So I think this is even better the second time around. And it's good to see both of you, but go enjoy your Friday. If I don't see you before the holidays, have an amazing holiday, and a little baby coming soon. Very excited.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thanks for having us.
It's been a pleasure.
And give the love to the family, please, and happy holidays.
You too.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.